Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, welcome back to CLS Social Studies. Today in this chapter we're going to start talking about the division of the United States. So we're going to start with the California question. After the Mexican-American War, the United States grew in land size by approximately 25% with the gaining of the Mexican Cession. Now the question is, what is going to happen with this land? When the territories are eligible to become states, will they become slave states or will they become free states? According to the compromises of the past, if the states were located at a certain degree north on the map, they had to enter as a free state. But what would happen if one of those territories was in that land was above and below that line? A bitter slave dispute. That's what. So the Missouri Compromise of 1820 prohibited slavery north of the 36° 30 line, and if a territory were to become a state below that line, they were open to slavery. President Polk wanted to extend the 36-30 line all the way to the Pacific Ocean, dividing the Mexican Cession into both free and slave territories. Some members of Congress agreed with Polk's plan, and others wanted the issue of slavery to be decided by popular sovereignty, which was the idea that the political power belongs to the people, effectively giving the citizens of the territory the right to decide if they wanted slavery or not. So let's continue with this north and south debate now, because you're talking about that 36-30 line. And between 1774 and 1804, all northern states had officially abolished the institution of slavery, and most northerners wanted to ban slavery in all parts of the Mexican Cession, no matter where on the map they were located. In 1846, the Wilmot Proviso was proposed in Congress. The proviso stated that all land obtained from the war with Mexico would be free of slavery, and in 1848 the Northern abolitionists formed a new political party named the Free Soil Party, which supported the Wilmot Proviso, but it was never enacted. Southerners did not want California to become a state free of slavery because if it had, there would be an imbalance in the Senate and abolitionist states would hold the deciding votes. This angered many of the Southerners, leading to strong feelings of sectionalism in the United States. Sectionalism is the idea that when someone favors the interests of their section of the nation over the interests of the whole nation. So no matter the splintering of the nation's ideals, on September 9th, 1850, California entered an application or applied to enter the Union. So with an attempt to satisfy members of Congress from the North and the South, a senator from Kentucky named Henry Clay offered a resolution, the Compromise of 1850. There were many points to the compromise that attempted to appease both sides. To appease the Northern abolitionists, the number one agreement was that California would enter the Union as a free state. Another minor point is that the slave trade, but not slavery itself, would end in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. To appease the South, the number one agreement was that they would get the Fugitive Slave Act, or the Fugitive Slave Law. Other minor points included that it would give up, Texas would give up land east of the upper Rio Grande River, and in return the government would pay the debt that Texas had accrued when it was an independent republic. The final major point for the Compromise of 1850 would be how the rest of the land would be handled. The rest of the Mexican Cession would be considered federal land, and the question of slavery would be decided using popular sovereignty, which would lead to vicious disputes in the future. However, for now, the compromise was enacted with temporarily settle the disputes between the slave and the free states. So what was that number one deal that the slave states got? The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. So this reward for the South, this Fugitive Slave Law, made the abolitionist North furious. It created laws that hurt escaped slaves in the North, even bleeding over to Northern free African Americans. The law incorporated four major points. Number one, It made it a crime for anyone to aid runaway slaves and allowed officials to arrest runaway slaves in free areas. Number 2, slaveholders could go to the North and collect escaped slaves or free black persons and incorporate them into slavery in the South. Number 3, slaveholders could take suspected fugitives to United States commissioners who would decide their fate. The commissioners would receive more money to send a black person into slavery than to set them free. Number 4, it made it so accused fugitives could not testify on their behalf. So the Fugitive Slave Law made it hard for Northern abolitionists to help the freed slaves. The Underground Railroad became even more important to hide runaway slaves, even going further into the North. So this Fugitive Slave Act enraged Northerners as enforcement of the act was immediate. The Underground Railroad became more of a hope for slaves. Thousands of Northern free African Americans fled into Canada in fear that they would be captured and brought to the South and incorporated into the institution of slavery. One such story was of Anthony Burns. In 1854, Burns was a slave from Virginia who was able to rent himself out for work as long as he paid his master a fee. One day, Burns boarded a ship destined for Boston. Once he arrived in Boston, he sent the letter back to his brother, who was owned by the same slave owner, Charles Suttle. Suttle intercepted the letter and traveled to Boston to retrieve his quote-unquote property. Burns was a fugitive slave, and Burns was taken to court to be retrieved by Suttle. Thousands of Northern abolitionists flooded the streets and the courthouse to free Burns, but President Franklin Pierce sent in the United States military to aid in the capture and return of Burns. Burns' return to slavery persuaded many Northerners to join the abolitionist cause. California entering the Union was one big cause of division between the North and the South, and we're going to cover a few more. I'll see you next time.